former prisoner and inmate.
You did it. What are you doing, Guns?
You bit the hell out of me.
Wanna see you with your hands up. Going straight to the sky, let me see you put your hands up. Cause we do till we die and we on another level.
I'm at New York City.
To the first we get by, got a piece of the pie. Told you once, told you twice that we only got one life.
On the way to achieve success after prison, and he's going to share his story with us right now.
Diamond shine, best at night. You wear yours, I'll wear mine. Go dumb.
What's up? So, welcome back, me, you, whatever. This is going to be kind of a longer video. I've been working so much on my new book, The Snowman Chronicles. And every week I have authors on my radio show that come on the show and share the genesis of their writing. What inspired them to write? Where did the story come from? How did it come about? Was there an event in their life or a career they had or a job they had? They met somebody, something sparked, triggered in their mind an idea to write a book, right? And it's funny, I've never really shared mine in full. And while I'm kind of dialing back the stories from my life for later on, the thing is, like the gangster stories, stuff like that, I'm just saving those for when I have something to promote. When I have a project to promote, then I'll come out and give some stories, try to keep them like 20 minutes and just go, some good stories. For now, I'm like, what can I share? And I'm sitting there working on my book all day, every day. Like I've been averaging probably 8 to 10 hours a day on the computer working on my book. And that's the thing. Most people don't get it. When you're writing a book, it's like, I finished a book. I finished this book in prison, but I've been doing editing and formatting for about 6 months. I finished several months ago, but now you got to go back and polish it and edit it and polish and edit it. Then I got to go to a series of proofreaders and beta readers. We're going to go through and polish it, find any mistakes or double words or things that don't make sense, whatever. So it's a process, a long process. It's not easy. And there's a reason why there's not a whole lot of writers in the world, you know what I'm saying? Like authors. But, like I said, I've discovered that I'm very good at it, but I'm not very good at other things, you know what I'm saying? Like anything really. But I used to be a pretty good athlete when I was young. But other than that, this is the thing that I'm really good at and I really enjoy. Like I love it. And so as I'm sitting there working earlier, I'm like, you know what? I take a break and like I do on my radio show, talk about my evolution as a writer because it's a good one. So like again, I when I'm promoting something in the near future, I'll give some more of these like crazy anecdotal gangster stories that I was involved in. But center myself, man. I'm gonna drive my OCD crazy. But for now, I'm just gonna share some more personal things and hope you enjoy them. So I'm just recording this on my phone, so it is what it is. So as a writer, writing is a very unique gift, and obviously, I imagine that if I was to poll the average person, like how many people do you know who wrote a novel? The average person probably won't know any. Maybe they'll say one, maybe two. I don't know. Depends. Like me, I know tons because I interview authors for a living. But there's a reason why it's not that many people do it because it doesn't pay well unless you get like really successful. Also, it's very, very hard. It's time. And the other thing is, most people aren't good at it. Probably 90% of the authors who come on my show should have never wrote a book. They self-published it. They paid to publish it. They're not good, not well written. They're hacks really. About 10% are good, and that's cool. That's more than I would have guessed, right? But I'm very critical of writing because I'm a writer. I've written 10 novels now. So I wanted to share my evolution of how I became a writer. So I'm going to take it back in time to my life and tell you how I got there. This point where I discovered I had this gift to write, So I always tell people that I'm a storyteller masquerading as a writer. You know what I'm saying? I tell stories. I just happen to teach myself how to write them in a literary way because that is the format of delivery that I was able to utilize when I was in prison. Now I'm writing a script for a TV series. And I'll get into that later, how the people involved with the TV project thought we're going to get a big shot writer, pay him a bunch of money, A or B list writer, put his name on there, make it, and he'll write it, whatever. And I was like, why can't I write it? They're like, well, you're a novelist, it's a different format. I said, well, give it a shot. And they're like, you serious? I said, yeah. So I gave it a shot, and I blew them away. They were like, damn, dude, we got a screenwriter. But it's my one unique gift in life. It's the one thing I'm truly passionate about and that I love. I love trout fishing like that. I do enjoy deer hunting on the same level, but that's it. Trout fishing, deer hunting, and writing. And really storytelling is what it is. I'm not like, I don't claim to be some literary writer or something like that. Although I do know my work is pretty literary. It's, I had to tone down my books that I published to be a king behind me, because when the proofreaders and editors and beta readers first read it, they're like, it's too literary and you're going to go over the head of most readers. Most readers read at about an 8th, 9th grade reading level, right? And so it's not a big deal. That's what most people do. So I had to dial it back a little bit. So because I was trying, I guess, to be too literary. I'd read too many books and I wanted to be like Robert Ludlum and stuff like that, which don't need to be, not for these stories. So when I was a kid, everybody knows I was a super dysfunctional kid, like really messed up kid. It's basically as messed up as a kid you get. I was that kid in school. You know how you had the one really troubled kid who's just F up. He's always in trouble. He's always in the office. He's always getting kicked out of class, always in detention. That was me. There's always a couple of them, right? In the school. A whole school is like 2. I was one of them. So that's my whole life. And I never considered for a moment that I had a gift as a writer. I dropped out of school, or I got kicked out of school when I was 14 years old, went back for 9 weeks as a freshman, got expelled again indefinitely, then went to adult ed on and off. Then I went to some college classes when I was like 19, 20. I took some culture or English 101, and I did okay at them, but my spelling and grammar was bad, you know what I'm saying? But I had a good comprehension of the formatting and of how to write a good story. Came natural, that because I was a reader. I wasn't a huge reader as a kid. The only thing I read as a kid was Ranger Rick. And the only reason I did that was it's just an outdoor book, for kids. It's got a bird of the month, and you go in and you read about the bird. And it's about animals and stuff. It's called Ranger Rick. It's designed for kids like age 5 to like 10, right? My grandmother, my dad's father, kept sending me these things till I was like 16 years old. And I read them. I read them. So I did have a understanding of words, whatever. But then years later, when I got to be, 16, 17 years old, I'll tell you a quick story, and this is a good one, so you can it illustrates how it happened. There was this is a good story, actually. There was a gym that I worked out. It's called not Weight Station. I think it's called the Weight Company. And it's 13 Mile in Little Matt. And I would go to this gym, and it just so happened next door was a bookstore, right? And one day after I worked out, I'm like, I'm going to this bookstore, right? So I went to the used book section, which is in the back. I was probably 17 years old, 18 years old. The true irony of this is that my girlfriend worked there. My wife today actually worked there at the time, but I didn't meet her. She wasn't working when I went in there a few times. My wife had a literary scholarship in high school and worked at that store, that very one. But my nose always itches when I start talking. I think I gotta trim my nose here, maybe or something. So I went in there, and there's a used book section in the back. I'm like, they're cheaper. Just being cheap. I'm gonna trash it anyways. I might as well buy a used book. They're only $2 one. So I went in there and I bought like a fantasy novel, right? Enjoyed it. I was like, yeah. Went back, bought a sci-fi novel. I enjoyed it. Eventually, over the years, I got into military and paramilitary. So if anyone knows Robert Ludlum, it's one of my favorite authors. I could maybe have him tied for my favorite. My favorite is Mario Puzo. It has nothing to do with my backstory in the mafia. Not that I was in the mafia, but around it. I just enjoy his writing. It's well done. And my favorite book is The Sicilian, which is by Mario Puzo. But Robert Ludlum is probably an overall better writer. He wrote Jason Bourne. He writes stories like that. And I fell in love with his books, and I'd buy every one that I could find, and I'd read it. I did read, I went through like whole series of sci-fi things, like Star Wars series, read them all. Then I go through fantasy, read them all, like different series, 5-book series, read them all. And then I bring them back and sell them back to the store. This is when I was older. This is when I was in my 20s. That store was always there. It's probably still there. And so over the years, I kept returning to this place and buying books. And a lot of people thought it was weird because I'm telling you, I would go to, every Sunday I went to dinner, it was dinner at my grandparents' house. Sometimes I spend the whole weekend there. And I go on Friday and stay till Sunday evening. But that was when I was younger. When I got older, I had a car. I could just drive over there and, have dinner on Sunday, hang out, watch football, whatever. And that's when the old mob guys would come and go all the time, and I just, whatever, I don't care. I would be reading a book, like at the kitchen table while we're eating dinner, like this. And my Uncle Pete, who was a ball-busting, freaking wise guy kind of dude, he would bust my balls. He'd say to his brother, my Uncle Sal, I call him Uncle Bud, he said, look at this freaking guy. He thinks he's smart. He's reading a book, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's what I like to read. And I would say to him, I'm sorry, Uncle Pete. I would say, it's not my fault. You're too stupid to read. He was illiterate because he was dyslexic. So like me, he dropped out of school when he was 15 years old, became the black sheep, took to the streets, started hanging around gangsters and wise guys and bikers and criminals. That was his life. That's all he ever knew, just like me. But he wasn't like a violent guy like me, or didn't like to fight, wasn't brawling. He was just a hustler. And he wasn't even a big earner. He just would do anything illegal to make a buck so he didn't have to work. He's the one who taught me, kind of working as suckers play. You can make money doing this, that, and that. And then he taught me how to do it. And I'm like, oh, I can make money doing this and that. But he would see me reading and bust my balls. And I would say, man, motherfucker, you illiterate ass, you can't read. It's not my fault you can't read. And my grandpa would get mad at me. He would say, stop it. Stop. Don't say that. It's not his fault. He's dyslexic. And I'd feel bad and whatever. My Uncle Sal would bust his balls. Shut your dumb ass up, man. You can't, just because you can't read, let the guy read. He likes to read. So I would be there, and all my grandpa's paisans and gumbadis, these old dagos, some of them mafia tied, some not. Basically, they are all mafia tied. There's no way around that. It was just, they all had some association or relation to the mob. Whether they were involved directly in crime or not, I don't know. Some were. So they're old men. I didn't pay attention. But they would come in, and I'd be sitting on the couch, like reading a book. Now, these are guys that knew I was a train wreck. You know what I'm saying? They knew I'd been in and out of jail. I caught 7, 8 felonies by the time I was 17 years old. I did time in the youth home. I was all this trouble, man. I mean, because my grandparents would talk to them all the time. The community was very tight. Sicilians are very tight-knit community. And, if they didn't see them every day or every week at the house or at their house or at the Eastern Market where they kind of hung out. My grandpa owned a business. They see me at church. After church, it was a big congregation, about 200 people would stand around and talk for 45 minutes. So they're super, and then they might say, Alonzo went to jail again or got arrested. And they were bonding me out all the time. My grandpa was bonding me out. I didn't have anyone else to call. I get arrested usually for like driving unsuspended or something. They get busted with pipe bombs at one point. Got busted with the steroid things. My grandpa took care of that with a judge, paid off a judge so I didn't have to go to prison. But so all these guys, these old men and bodies, aunts too, cousins, everybody knew that I was this train wreck of a kid, this always fighting, always getting arrested and going. I mean, that's what they did. They gossiped. They all gossiped. And I could hear them on the phone speaking in Sicilian about me because they would say Alonzo a bunch of times. And back then I could understand some of it. And they basically were saying, yeah, I got arrested again. We had to pick him up in jail. He's an F up. He's a screw up. They did the same thing to my Uncle Pete when he got busted selling coke. They busted his balls. But anyways, they would see me reading and thought that was kind of strange. And of course, fast forward it years later when I'm in prison, and not joking, man, right up to the day I got arrested and put in prison, I was reading. I was so into reading that I would, when I'm driving, this is how insane I was, high on heroin, driving, I have a nice car, you never know, I look just like this, no one would ever know, but I have this I had a Suzuki Grand Catera, like the big sidekick. It's black and tinted with a kicker. It was pretty cool. And I have this on a steering wheel. And I'd have it there, and I'd look up, read a line, look up, read a line. And I remember people would pull up next to me and go, "What's that dude reading a book? Really?" Driving down the street, 696 doing 90 miles an hour on a freeway, reading. Stupid. But I was so into the story, and I really was an eclectic reader. I read every type of story. I mean, I had my favorites. Like I discovered a real military Vietnam stories. When one of those used books that I saw there was a Vietnam story. I don't remember the name of it, but the author was named John Lepperman. And it would ultimately be the best Vietnam book I'd ever read. Amazing story. It inspired my second novel, A Rat's Tale. I'll tell you about that in a minute. T-A-L-E, not a rat like a rat, but like a rat's tail. The name of his company was the Bravo Blue Rats, and that's why it's called A Rat's Tale, T-A-L-E. It was an amazing story, and I said to myself, I want more of this. So I went back to the store, and there was no more used books about Vietnam, but they had a whole section for military. So I went in there and I bought all the Special Forces books that were like Green Berets, Army Rangers, Marine Recon, Air Force, Delta Force, whatever. And I just went over like a couple of months. I read about 20 books, read them all. And I loved them all. And I said to myself, this is when the seed was planted. This is what I'm getting at. I remember thinking, in these books, about 20% of them is really good. It's entertaining or funny, action-packed. Wow. But 80% of it's kind of mundane, boring, day-to-day grind, digging, latrine holes and, stupid like political crap with your COs, your commanding officers and bullshit. And I thought to myself, I could write a story that inspired by these books that would basically be the whole book would be action or funny or or interesting or fighting. I'm like the whole book. It's a fiction book, but I would make it an autobiography. So it was told first person by a character who experienced all this stuff in Vietnam over three tours. And since I liked the Special Forces, I originally had him start as a Marine. Then after they left the Marines, they joined the Army thinking it was going to be better in the Army, and it was just as bad or worse. So they volunteered for Special Forces, and they became Green Berets, right? And it tells their whole story, and it's a very sad story because they lose a lot of friends and stuff. But anyways, the wheels were moving in my head at the time. I'm like, I could write something like this. So years later, I get arrested, and I go to prison. It's just a horrible time in my life. I went and robbed the bank, and it's just when you get arrested and you're facing 30 years in prison, it's game over. So I ended up in the hole for 17 months. And you may or may not know the story, but I got into it with the sheriff's deputies coming back from court. I was already in the hole for knocking some dude out or caving in his eye. I knocked him out, but caved in his eye too. He stole from me. He stole 2 pies from my box when I was at church. I came back and freaking went berserk and caved his face in. Busted him up. I know I caved his face in because I had to pay restitution. So they didn't make me pay for the surgery, but they made me pay for the ambulance ride, which is whatever. Thank you. It was only $700. If I had to pay for a surgery, I would have freaking had to pay. But I got a description of the wound or whatever. Broken orbital socket, 7 stitches, blah, 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 blah. This little light-skinned kid freaking thought he was tough. Didn't work out for him. So I'm in the hole, and I'm coming back from court, and I'm being kind of a cocky douchebag of a kid. I'm banging. I'm in the hole, so when I come back from court, I got to go straight to like a holding cell bullpen on my own. They can't put me in with the rest of the guys and wait till I'm processed and they get to me and they go down. No, I get in my own spot. So I'm banging beats on the glass. Boom, 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 boom. Everyone laughing. There's like 200 guys in all these holding cells are laughing. They tell me to shut up. I won't shut up. Moral of the story is they eventually came in and tried to taser me. They didn't get me. They didn't get me good. One prong hit me in the neck here. And I was able to knock it off. And then they came in, pepper sprayed me, and then they got me. So after they pepper sprayed me, they walk me. I'm all cuffed. They're wrenching on my arm. Like, they're just wrenching my arm. I'm going, dude, I know where I'm going, bro. Relax. And the guy's like, shut up, then, man. Don't talk. Don't speak, whatever. And I look at him and said, man, you got a small dick. I already know that. And he freaking gets all mad. So when he walked into the elevator, as soon as I go in the elevator, the guy grabs me by my head and smashes me against the wall. And these 5 guys kick the shit out of me. I mean, they kicked the shit out of me. And I'm cuffed behind my back, so there's no fighting. And they whooped my ass for about 30, 40 seconds. I had to get stitches. I was all busted up. Before I got back to my cell, they called the rock managing officer, said what had happened. They walked talking, and he went into the guy hated me. I don't remember. Donahue was his name. He went into my cell, took a 5-gallon bucket of mop water, and personally put all my pictures and because I had a bunch of pictures. Those kind of gave me some hope to think maybe I can get home to this life, deer hunting, salmon fishing, my girlfriend, my dogs, whatever. And they put all my pictures and all my letters, my grandparents' letters, everything on the bed, dumped a 5-gallon bucket of water over them, and this is still winter. So it was cold as hell down there. So they, you get in the cell, they like turn around and uncuff, right? So you got to turn around, like back up to the bars, and they uncuff you. And I turn around, I said, yeah, what's up now, motherfucker? Come in, you 5 against me. I said, you're going to go tell your girls you had one to go today? You forget to tell you I was cuffed and it was 5 of you, huh? Tough guys, bunch of bitch ass motherfuckers. I'm going off. I mean, I'm yelling. I'm like, you bitch ass motherfucker, come on. And I'm just spazzing. They just walk away. They ignore me and walk away. It was about this time I had sort of a divine moment. My letters, my grandma's letters, I look at them. They're from both my grandparents, but my grandma always sent them. My grandpa would, he Sicilian was his native language. He did learn English. He grew up in America from age 5. And so I remember my grandmother, I looked at those letters and I'm dripping blood. And I'm out of breath. I'm all busted up. Blood's dripping down my face, dripping on the floor. And and I look at those letters on my bunk. And I remember my grandmother had come to see me. And she says, you write the most beautiful letters. That's what she said. You write the most beautiful letters. I give them to Papa, my grandpa, and he reads them 2 or 3 times. You could be a writer. She said that. You could be a writer. She said that on a visit right to my face. They're both on the other side of the glass. And I'm like, whatever. But then when I went back to my cell that day and I looked at those wet letters, I still have some of them. I still have them around here somewhere. Maybe 2, 3 of those letters. Then I heard my grandmother was like my mother. Her voice saying, you could be a writer. This is right after I just got jumped and I'm beat down. And, a lot of people won't believe this or ever understand it. Like, I'm choked up, struggling and not to start crying because, I hit rock bottom at that moment. My grandma's voice, and it ruined all my mail and my pictures. And I considered just killing myself, because they were telling me they wanted to give me 30 years. They did want me to rat on some people that were marginally tied to organized crime. I wasn't ratting on nobody. I wasn't going to have my grandfather be the guy they look at and go, oh, it's your grandson's the rat. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't consider that for a second. I thought, well, I could just check out. They give you a razor every couple of days, right, to shave. And you could crack it open and slit your wrist in the shower. I'm going to take a shower and just go in there, slit, and you'll be dead in 5 minutes. You'll bleed out. No big deal. I wasn't scared to die. I wasn't scared. I was like, I've never been scared to die, man. If I could sit here and tell you all the crazy shit that's happened to me in my life, from being shot, gun battles. I had a guy empty a clip at me from like 10 feet away and missed all like 8 shots. I was standing there with a gun, froze up. Another time I was robbing a guy with a gun, saying, give me the jacket. He had 20 grand that I just gave him for a quarter kilo of heroin was what it was. And as he took off his jacket, he pulled the gun, started shooting. Bang, 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 bang. He hits me in the leg, in the shin, and his gun jams. I was just like, and then I started shooting. What I'm saying is, I was never scared to die. I didn't want to die. I did love life. I did enjoy life. I did believe I had potential to be something. I did love my girlfriend. I did love my friends and my family. So I didn't want to, I just wasn't like, I want to die. But man, they're telling you you're going to give you 30 years. I'm like, I'm not doing 30. I remember telling my girlfriend years before I ever went to prison, saying if they ever gave me 5 years or more, I'd kill myself. And I wouldn't want to do it. And I'll come home to nobody and nothing. And she's like, don't say that. Don't ever say that. She'd say it all the time. I'm like, nah, I'm checking out. So now on this day, I'm sitting there bleeding. And I'm thinking, well, I could just check out, man. No big deal. I lived life. I lived the life of 10 men. I did a lot of crazy stuff, some good, some bad. But 30 years, no, I'm not doing 30 years, man. Freaking 30 years. So At that moment, I won't say I heard God's voice, but I felt God's voice saying to me, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Like literally a light at the end of the tunnel. And then in my mind at that moment, I saw a tunnel, a long, dark tunnel. And it was a little speck of light at the end of it. I stared at it and said, well, what is that light? And at that moment, I looked at all those books on my shelf, on my little desk. And I just knew. At that moment, that tunnel, a vision, I had it for like 30 seconds. Well, what's the light? And I looked at these books, and I remember Grandma saying, you could be a writer. And at that moment, I said, I'm going to write. I'm going to spend this time in prison, and I'm going to write. I know I have it. I've created all these stories in my mind over the years while I was, reading, and I'd be like, God, man, this story would be so much better if it was like this or it was like that. And I created scenarios for stories all the time. I'd often dream about stories that were like, oh man, that'd make a great book. So at that moment, I was blessed with a moment of clarity and peace. I just knew God was saying, this is your calling. You can do this. I'm like, I have a 7th grade education. I don't know how to freaking write. My spelling's terrible. Grammar, But he's saying, that's not what you do. You're a creator. You're an artist. Paint with words. So I said, okay. Well, I didn't have paper or pen in the hole, so I couldn't write. So I sat there on my bunk, laying on my bunk for the next 14 months. And in that 14 months, I believe I wrote my first 3, maybe 4 books. 3 for sure. To Be a King was one of them, but I didn't write it until it was my 6th book. Like I had already written 5 novels that I wanted to do in front of this one before I even got To Be a King. But I did come up with To Be a King while I was in the hole. My first book was called Second Chance. In fact, it's right here. The manuscript is, I think it's right here. It's right here. And it was about these 2 high school best friends. They actually become brothers when one of them's father, he's an only child, his father dies. His best friend's parents, these black couple that he grew up with, who love him like a son, adopted him. And when he gets the scholarship, starts getting all these scholarships to play football, he refuses to take the scholarship unless they take his boy or his brother now. Black kid named Omar, who's a quarterback. But he's kind of short for a quarterback, and he's not really mobile. In the NFL, if you're going to be a black quarterback, you got to be mobile. You got to be able to run, right? Not a pocket passer. And if you're a pocket passer, you need to be tall, look the part. He wasn't any of that. But Chance, the name of the main character's name is Chance, he knew the dude was a beast and a winner. So all these schools kept coming to him saying, we want you to play, middle linebacker, running back, both, special teams. All this. He was a huge, top recruited kid in the country, like in the top 20. He's like, I'm not going anywhere without Omar, his new adopted brother. It's only been like a year since they adopted him. Everybody's like, well, we're not giving a scholarship to this guy. You don't think he's good enough, right? Finally, there's this recruit from the University of Miami comes to him and says, we'll give him a ride too. We want you that bad. He says, okay, bet. He's super happy and excited, man. He's like in tears. You can't believe it. He's got this cute little girlfriend named Elba. And that night he goes to a park with her, and they kind of, make love under the moon. And he's super excited that his boy, he hasn't even told his boy the good news yet, man, because his boys and everybody went out to a party after the game. They just smashed the shit out of somebody, and he ran like 5 touchdowns. So he just goes out with the girl. Then he goes and tells Omar, we're going to Miami, University of Miami. So they go down there for like preseason training, like an orientation and stuff, right? And they're down there for 2 weeks, but he misses his girl, so he wants to come back and see her. So they fly back to surprise her, and he catches some dude with her at a party, but there's only like 6 people there, and she's passed out in a bed, and this dude's like on top of her. And he goes in there and gets crazy, and he beats the crap out of him, smashes a TV over his head, and he dies. They charge him with like 2nd-degree murder, and they give him 16 years in prison. So he's gone. Chance, this superstar player, gone. Omar, the brother, his best friend, this little black quarterback, goes on to win a national title at University of Miami. He's a beast. And he ends up getting drafted, but he's kind of like a Tom Brady, low draft pick, 6th round. They give him a pretty small contract. It's only like $1.2 million. This takes place like 20 years ago. And so it's not a lot of money, but, he's in the game. And he plays for 2 or 3 years, and he's a beast. His team is building. He gets drafted by the Dolphins, so he's still in Miami. And but he's a beast, and they're building a team around him. So by the time his 2 or 3 year contract is up, they give him a massive contract, $80 million contract for like 10 years. So as soon as the first thing he does is hire the best attorney in the country, say, get my brother out, my boy out. So this attorney starts looking up his case. And there's a lot of mitigating circumstances to the case. He never went to trial. He had a cheap, crappy lawyer to convince him to take a plea agreement so he wouldn't get 30 years in prison. So he ends up getting 16. There's never, a discovery was never presented regarding like the substances in the dude's, system and all this stuff. Anyway, Omar gets him out after 8 years. So he between 4 years in college, 3 years in the Dolphins with his first contract last year. He's been gone 4 years, and he starts hanging around Omar, and he's living a different life. They got a mansion. He moves in with them. He's got 2 mansions, one in Miami, one in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and they're flying around on private jets and crap and balling. They have a couple of homeboys hanging around. These funny ass dudes, Jose and Felix, and they're just like they're hangers on. He buys them cars and pays their rent. And I know why not? He's got all this freaking money. Omar does. He buys freaking Chance or Rolls Royce or Bentley. I can't, one of those two. As soon as he gets out, it's the keys in the garage, man. Go get it. Big 8-car garage. Anyways, I wrote that book. I'm not going to give you any more of it because I don't want to ruin the story for someday there's so much more to it. There's a crazy plot twist. Crazy. But the name of the book is Second Chance. And the main character's name is Chance Enzo. And when I was done, I sent it to my cousin Joe. And I said, man, here, I finished this book. It took me a year. He read it on the subway going back and forth to work because he worked in Chicago. He's like, dude, this freaking book is so good, bro. Like, there are times where I have to stop reading because I don't want people to see me crying. It was very emotional. It was a very emotional story. And he's like, just unbelievable. All day I'm thinking about it. Like, I can't wait to get back on the train and read it, every day. And he reads it. He says, dude, you are very, very talented, dude. Very talented. I can't believe this. So he let his wife read it. She said the same thing. So I said, cool, thanks. So I started reading another book, the Vietnam story. Again, it had been sparked into my mind years before while I was a free man. So I'm in my cell, laying there staring at the ceiling. And I wrote that book over like 3-4 months in my mind, all day, all night. That's all I did. 12, 14, 15 hours a day laying there. I'm writing the book in my head. I'm seeing pictures in my mind. You know what I mean? Now I just got to translate those pictures to words when I get a pen and paper, right? But I can see it very clearly. The characters, the happenstances, the whole plot, the subplot, story, the main, the romantic interest, the conflict and resolution. It's all there in my mind. But it takes time. So it takes like 4 months just imagining the story. But when I'm done, I know it. Right now, I could rewrite any one of my books right now. They're all on computer, on file in my mind. I might forget a few details, but those details are pop. Sometimes when I'm editing like the Snowman Chronicles, not joking, which I wrote like 10 years ago. Literally, I wrote it 8 years ago. And I got a line and I'm editing and I'm like, oh, I see what I'm saying here. I should say this next. And as I'm reading it, it literally says what I was going to suggest I say. You know what I'm saying? Oh, man, it's a good spot to say this. And then reading, boom, oh, it says that. So it's my mind, it automatically knows what the right words are and what the right scene is and the right context and the right, description or whatever it is. The key to a great story, and I hear this all the time, and anyone who's read one of my books will tell you, like, the only people who will understand any of this are people who read my book, both of my books, and they're going to be like listening like this because they're like, I read it. I know. I mean, I get it. I've always wanted to know, like, how did he do this? Like, how did he? People tell me all the time, I've told this many times, but the former CEO of Lear Corporation read both my books on his private jet over 3 days, came back to Detroit, called me, asked me to lunch. I met him for lunch. He shakes my hand, says, Gunner, you're the greatest writer in the world. Nobody knows about. And I said, I'm working on that, man, but thanks, thank you. And he's like, I just don't know how I could do that. And he was one of those guys who said, listen, I grew up in Grosse Pointe, around, some of those people, the real characters. He's like, but obviously you had a lot of intimate knowledge of that world. It's impossible. Nobody ever write that book like that without some intimate knowledge of that world. I said, yeah, I was around it. I knew some people. And people who read my books constantly say, dude, it's like watching a movie in my mind. Hear it all the time, a couple times a week. Somebody's like, man, I just finished your book. Like, dude, like I can picture it. It's so real. I feel like I'm there. I'm like, well, that's what I was trying to do, And they always say it's very emotional. The ending is kind of, heart pull-stringing. And my goal is to make you cry. My goal is to make you cry at points in the book, not just the end. The end does. It's very emotional and it chokes you up. I could read the end of To Be a King right now, myself. Read it at least 20 times. And if I read the last 5 pages, I'd cry. That's how powerful it is. You can't get around it. It's that powerful. And A Rat's Tale, this Vietnam story, was even more emotional. I tell people all the time when I give them the story behind A Rat's Tale, I say, it's my retirement plan. I believe that's my best work, A Rat's Tale. I believe it is. It's just such a powerful story. This guy, he's an old man. He's like 70 years old. His kids buy him and his wife a trip to Hawaii. And he doesn't want to go because he has a lot of memories from Hawaii, and he doesn't want to rehash those memories. She starts having flashbacks, like legit flashbacks. Like he's drinking and got a gun and he's hiding in the bushes behind his house. They live out in the country. And he's a retired hunting guide is what he is. And he spent 3 years in Vietnam. And his wife's like, why are you freaking out? Like, what the hell? It's just Hawaii. He's like, you don't know, honey, and she had asked him for many years, like 30 years since they've been married, like, tell me about your time in Vietnam. I don't want to talk about it. You know what I'm saying? And she's, well, why? She's like, that's best that we don't talk about. This guy was on a part of a hunter-killer team and with the Green Berets, and he saw a lot of death. He caused a lot of death. And he was a young kid, and he basically says to her, at one point, they get on the plane to go to Hawaii. He says, okay, I'll go. He's freaking out. It's a 17-hour flight or whatever it is. And he says, she's begging him to tell. And he says, all right, listen, I'm going to tell you. You can't judge me. I was a 21, 22-year-old kid. I was impressionable. I was trained to do this stuff. I was taught to do it. I was told to do it. I didn't have any value for human life. We were bad guys. And she's like, don't worry, I won't judge you. I won't judge you. Tell me. And then the story goes, that's the prologue. Then the story flashes back to chapter 1, is his first day in Vietnam and how he ended up there. He volunteered to go there. He was the last male in his family, so he didn't have to go. It's called sole survivor law. If you're the last male, carry on your father's name, they can't force you to go to active combat zone. He said, F that, I'm stationed in Germany. I want to go fight for my country. And he's volunteered. And people are like, you're volunteering to go to Vietnam? Yeah. So he shows up and he ends up part of this unit. It's a small little company of guys with these funny characters, and they're just wild. And his first day in country, he they call him Jumpin' Joe because he jumped right into it. Like his first day in country, he got assigned to this squad to go protect this bridge, right? There's bridge, several miles from their little base. They call it FOB, Forward Operating Base. Nobody ever wanted to go do this job because it's boring. It's just, they just sit by this bridge. They got a 50 cal machine gun and gun bunker, and they just protect this. It's a main supply route that they got to keep open. But, in case they have any, they call them sappers. Like the Viet Cong come in there with bomb satchel charges and they blow up the bridge. And now all these trucks can't get through to deliver supplies to their base and other bases. So they got to protect it. And his first night there, they volunteer him. Like, hey man, listen, go. A couple guys had dysentery, which is like diarrhea, and they made an excuse. I ain't going. So the supporting lead character, Sarge, his name is Al. He says, all right, we got to go do this. So I'm volunteering you. First day there. And they get attacked. The bridge gets attacked. They have a squad of 8 guys, and they're the only ones who survive. This Sarge and the character, his name is Joe. So they start calling him Jumpin' Joe. It's called the Jinho Bridge. And it was this hell of a freaking just gunfight battle. And eventually, right when they're about to get overrun, they're out of ammunition. They shot all the 50 caliber bullets. They threw all their grenades, everything. They're buying sandbags, laying there. They're dropping mortars on them. Bang, bang. Finally, the helicopters show up, gunships. You know, and those gunships got these miniguns. Just freaking, they call it Puff the Smoky Dragon. It's freaking just 30 caliber minigun, the ones that spin, chopping everything up, rockets, boom, and they get safe. He got like grazed, but he wasn't hurt, and he didn't. It was it. Then it just goes into this insane story of his life in Vietnam for the next 3 years, and they see a lot of death. They get constantly, or the whole book is either they're in a gun battle, a serious like Vietnam battle, or they're back at base causing mischief, getting in trouble. Like for one time, they stole their base commander's Jeep, went to town to go get drunk. On the way back, they hit a deer, like a one of those little deer, and came back to base with a busted up Jeep, of their colonel's Jeep, with a dead deer on the front, so the chef could cook it for them. They might as well kill it. They killed it. They might as well eat it. They were just constantly getting in fights. They go on leave and get in these brawls in Taiwan and all over the place, man. Like, what's the capital of Vietnam? Not Ho Chi Minh. Can't remember. It's Ho Chi Minh. But they were just in so much stuff. And there's a lot of really funny stuff. And it's all based on my imagination that was sparked into play when I read those books years earlier when I was in bookstore. So I wrote that book. And then my next book, my third book, was called, this is a romantic comedy, kind of. It was also inspired by me and my sister moving to New York when we did, right? So it's based on a brother and sister whose parents get killed. Mine didn't, but these ones do. And he was an athlete, athletic in school, kind of that guy. But then after his parents are killed, he starts drinking. And he doesn't go to college or whatever. And his sister's like, I got to get you out of here. I'm going to college in New York. I'm going to bring you to New York City. We're going to move in together, yada, yada, yada. So she brings him there. Like on the second day there, he meets his neighbor. And he meets this neighbor. It's a really good story. And it's a shorter book. It's like 350 pages. That's short for me. And the neighbor guy who subleases their apartment, he's this kind of eccentric piano coach. And he says, listen, he asked him, can you find somewhere to park my car? Because in New York, you got to drive around the block for like 5 times till you can find a spot if you're lucky. And it might be 3-4 blocks from your apartment, right? So he says, yeah, I could do that. So as he's driving around, waiting to find a spot within a couple blocks, so he pulls up the light. This is on Broadway in Upper West Side of Manhattan. Some dude like runs up and goes, dude, I'm late for work, man. I'll give you $20 if you just give me a ride. It's only like 20 blocks. I'm just late. I can't be late. And he's like, okay, get in. You know, it's like $20. I could use $20, you know? So the guy gets in. He drops him off. The guy had just robbed a jewelry store, the dude. And he had a pocket full of jewelry, like chains and crap. One of them fell in the car against the door there. Somebody who saw him rob it, watched him run up the car, got the plate, and by the time he finally came back, the cops were already sealed him off on the block, and they arrest him. And he's like, what the frick? His sister thinks that he robbed the jewelry store with this dude. He thinks she don't believe him because he had been drinking, he had been partying, he wasn't himself. He went from this like good student to an athlete and all this. So now she's like, dude, listen, you're a freaking train wreck, man. I can't believe. Second day in New York, I bring you to New York. I'm trying to change your life, turn your life around, and this is what you do. You rob a jewelry store, some freaking rando. I'm like, dude. She's like, good luck. God bless you. If you ever get your shit together, give me a call. And that's it. He says, don't write me, don't call me, don't nothing. He goes to prison for 5 years. In prison, he starts writing screenplays and TV series, like scripts for TV series and screenplays. He gets out 5 years later, doesn't have anything. He's got a duffel bag, about 20 scripts that he wrote, and like $50 from his account. He's in his khaki outfit that they release you in from jail, and he don't have anywhere to go. So he goes back to this apartment where he thinks his sister's living, right? So he goes there, knocks on the door. He's got his head shaved like mine. He's got some tattoos. He's a freaking big, tough guy. And been working out. He's all huge. Just out of prison. knocks on the door, and some little cute redhead answers the door. She's like, who are you? I'm looking for my sister. Her name was Anne-Marie, like my sister. She's like, oh, she doesn't live here anymore. She moved out like 3 years ago. And then somebody else lived here than me. Because I don't know this because the guy upstairs. And he says, yeah, oh, that guy. And he remembered, the guy's still there. She's like, yeah, she's gone. I don't know where she is, man. I'm sorry. And he's like, oh, well, I'm sorry to bother you. He said it was a really hot summer day, like 95 degrees. And he's carrying this big duffel bag full of everything he's got, which is just basically scripts, like a little bit of, cosmetics, but his scripts. And he says, can I bother you for one thing? And she's like, well, what? She's like, a glass of water. I'm just dying. It's hot out. He's drenched in sweat. He's a big, good looking motherfucker, though. He's a big, muscle bound, handsome dude, right? And she's kind of checking him out. She's like, yeah, sure. No problem. So she pours him a big, tall glass of Kool-Aid. And he chugs it down. It's like, oh, thank you so much. I was so thirsty. In fact, is there any way I could bother you for just another glass or water or anything? She's like, yeah. So when she opens the door up again, her cat runs out. And it's like, he had his duffel bag against the jamb of the door, right? The cat runs out and he tries to grab it and like knocks over his duffel bag. And the duffel bag kind of falls into her apartment a little bit. And he runs after the cat. She's like, oh my God, frisky. And she's all worried that she's going to lose her cat. And he finds her and he comes back and says, I'm sorry. Thank you for the, the Kool-Aid. Very hospitable. Thank you. I'm sorry to bother you. And he picks up his bag and he goes. He don't know where he's going. He don't have no money and he has nowhere to go. What he doesn't realize is that one of his scripts, a TV script, is still in her apartment. He doesn't know it because it kind of spilled out. So he goes to Central Park, which is only a few blocks away. And at night, Central Park can be very dangerous. There's a lot of bums, a lot of scumbags, there's criminals. He don't know what to do. It's summer, so he's not going to freeze to death and nothing like that. So he goes in Central Park and he lays down on the side of this grassy knoll. It's pretty it looks rural in Central Park. There's a lot of it. There's woods and, fields and rolling little mountains and stuff. And he don't know what to do. The guy don't know what to do. So he just falls asleep. When he wakes up in the morning, his duffel bag is gone. All the scripts that he wrote over 5 years are gone. Everything he worked so hard for all those years is gone. He has no money. He has no nothing. And his favorite turn. In fact, I'm going to rename the book Turntables. And there's a reason for that. Because he always says, so the tables turn. So at this point, he says, so the tables turn. I originally called it Soldier Story because his name is Soldier. His real name is Soldier. Soldier Shamrock. He's part Irish. But I'm just going to call it Turntables because it fits better. Because he always says it. So he wakes up and some bum or somebody stole his duffel bag. So he's got nothing. Nothing. He's basically almost in tears. He walks over to a bench on the side of the little highway that runs through Central Park, right? What he doesn't know is there's a big drug deal going down freaking just a mile up the road. And it's the cops. It's the undercover cops trying to bust these two drug dealers. And there's a deal goes down. And then all of a sudden, they see the cops going, "Rrr." They're in a Corvette. They back out, "Rrr," take woo, woo, and they get in a high-speed chase. So there's cops chasing this Corvette through Central Park. And he's just sitting there, he hears it. He looks down. This freaking Corvette doing 90 is blazing through the park. And right at that moment, in the car, these two drug dealers say, get rid of it. And they throw all this dope and money. There's some money. Not a lot, but it's I can't remember how much it is, but it's several $100s and a bunch of dope, coke. And they throw it out the window and it goes skipping to a stop. And then here comes the cops around the bend. Whoa! The cops didn't see him throw it out. So, whoa, another cop, whoa. And he's just sitting there and he looks at this bag on the curb almost next to him. And he picks it up. He looks inside. There's a knot of cash. Not a lot, but some. Actually, I think it was a couple $1,000s. And he's like, so the tables turn. That's his thing. So the tables turn. So he goes and throws the dope in the garbage. You don't want nothing to do with the dope. But he takes the money and he goes and rents this little place. This little crappy little one-bedroom apartment thing. It's, whatever it is. In New York, it's $800 a month for it. So he's got or more than that, but it was this crappy little place. But and then he went and got some clothes. And basically he went and applied for some jobs, and he got a job working at a restaurant as a server, right? That's a whole nother funny story. I won't get into the whole thing, but that's also inspired based on my real life when I got a job as a server in New York City, and they thought I was gay because I was like a pretty boy, and I actually got fired because they found out I wasn't gay because I was hitting on the girls, and I was not even a good server, so I don't blame them. But while he's working there at this as a server, he's been there a couple of weeks. Same thing happened to him. He's hitting on this girl, whatever. And the Mimi, the name of the owner, hears him. And of course, someone's like, "I thought you were gay, man." He's like, "What? What the fuck? I look gay? Look at me, man. Big muscle-bound tattooed dude." Like, well, she usually hires only gay servers. So, nah, now I'm straight as an arrow, man. I'm trying to tap that. And but while he was there was an older woman slipped him her number on a pack of matches and said, "Call me." Well, he knew who that woman was because they come in all the time. He says to his boss, "Why do those people look familiar? They look really familiar." I'm like, "You don't know who that is?" I'm like, "No, but they look familiar, but I'm from Detroit. I would never know anyone here." She goes, "That's the entire cast and the producer of the Guiding Light soap opera." And he's like, "Oh, my mom used to watch Guiding Light. Oh, I get it." He's like, "That's why." So then the woman kept coming in with this. They come in for lunch once a week, right? And she says, "Here, I'm paying this." And she hands him her credit card with a note and says, "Call me sometime." Well, after he gets fired from this job, oh God, he ends up in jail. Oh, geez, it's a funny story, man. After he gets fired from this job, he's got nothing, a little bit of money, $80 in his pocket. So he says, "I'm going to call this woman, this rich, the wife of the producer of the Guiding Light, the executive producer. She's the wife, this beautiful older woman. She's like 40, you know what I'm saying? He's like 21. He calls her. They end up hooking up. And one day while she's at her house while the husband, the producer, is out of town, he's going through like snooping around. He finds like the current script for the soap opera. He finds it. He looks at it and he tells her, "This is bullshit. And she needs to do this and do that and do this and that." And she's like, "Oh my God, that would be great. That's awesome." He's like, so he says, "Would you mind if I wrote a few scenes?" He's like, "Yeah, do it." So she wrote a few scenes and she would end up giving it to the producer. But he came home one day when he was there, and he had to jump off the balcony and run through these backyards. He got bit in the ass by a freaking dog. Like while he's running, he fell in this pool. He's like pothead like Long Island rich kids were sitting there. He's running through the backyard. He got a chunk hanging out of his ass, his pants. Lost one of his shoes. He's walking down this like street in Long Island. This richy, homes are $10 million. And he's limping along with a freaking one shoe. He reeks like alcohol because when he was in pain, when he was running from the kids, he saw these kids and they're like, "What happened, man?" And he kind of tells them, they're laughing. And he's like, "Can I have a swig of that freaking drink they're drinking?" So he chugs them down. And then, of course, he's walking down the street. Somebody calls the cops. The cops pull up. They pull him over. One shoe, no shirt, ripped in the ass, bit in the ass, smelling like alcohol. And they say, "Do you have an ID?" All he has is his prison ID. They arrest him. They put him in jail. He ends up calling the chick, and she gets him out. And eventually, she gives her husband that script. And he's like, "Wow, this is really good, man. Like, where's the writer that wrote this?" She's like, "I know him, man." Guy gets kind of like, "How do you know him?" He's like, "Oh, I met him." So he calls him into his office, NBC Studios or whatever, and he says, "Now, you're a hell of a writer, man. Keep in mind, meanwhile, the little redhead, where he left one of his scripts, is reading the script that he left, and she's blown away. She's like, "Oh my God." She's like telling her friends, "You got to read this, man. This is so good." And so they're reading it together. She's like, "This is amazing. Like, this dude, I don't know who he is. He came to my house, but I have no idea where this dude is, where he left. I don't know his name, nothing, but he left the script." And their friends are like, "Oh my God, dude, it's crazy." And so meanwhile, he gets a job as a writer for this soap opera. They hire him. And then at one point, they're looking for a new character to introduce. And the producer says, "Dude, the character is you. Like, looks like you. You look like, can you act?" He's like, "No, I'm just a writer. I don't know." He says, just read a few lines." And he's like, "Man, I think you got this. Read some more." They end up hiring him to become a new character on this soap opera. At which time, the little redhead girl happened to be watching it and sees this guy. It's like 3 months later. She sees him. She tells her friend, "Oh my God, that's the dude, the script dude." She's like, "No." And the whole time, his sister don't know he's out. he's trying to find his sister. He has this relationship with this dude. He ends up making friends with this guy named Rollo at this soup shop. And when he had to go to this job, you go to this job interview for the producer, he didn't have nothing to wear. And he went into this suit shop and he's like, man, listen, I got, like, how much is like a suit or whatever? And he's like, the cheapest one I got is, $500. Man. And the guy's like, why, what's up? He's like, I had this interview. I don't have nothing. And he's like, he looks him up and down and says, I have some kind of old suits in the back that people dropped off to get tailored and they didn't pick them up. I'll give you one for $100. So he goes in there and he says, so he suits him up and says, just take it, man, take it. And he becomes cool with this guy and becomes like his best friend. This slick Puerto Rican dude named Raphael, was it, or Rollo? I can't remember. But I think it was Raphael. And anyways, it's just a crazy story. I wrote this whole freaking story from my mind, and I hand it to the next group of readers when I'm done, and they're like, dude, are you serious, bro? Like, this is amazing. Like, one after another, every reader's like, I read the first one, amazing. Come back to the second one, wow, I think that one's better than the other one. Hand them back the third one, they're like, dude, I know I said the last two were better, my best books ever. I can't tell you how many guys in prison told me, and it's not tooting my own horn, I'm simply stating what people told me, where they were like, guys in prison were huge readers, are huge readers, huge. There were guys, example, the first guy who ever read my Vietnam story, was this kind of fat older dude. I saw him with a book all the time. He locked in the cell next to me. So I walked up to him and said, hey man, would you be interested in reading this book I just wrote? Just finished it, like that day. He's like, what's it about? I'm like, Vietnam autobiography. He's like, oh man, I was in Vietnam, he says. I'm like, really? And you probably love this, man. And he's like, yeah, let me check it out. I said, awesome, dude. He says, I was a Navy CB, which is the guys that support like the Navy SEALs and stuff in the Mekong Delta, whatever. But he was there. He was in there. So I come back with this huge manuscript. It's 1,100 pages handwritten, bro. It's the second draft because I wrote it out first, went back and kind of tried to polish it up better and wrote it again. 1,100 pages. I'm like, here you go. Hand it to him, right? That was new. Like, that was before lunch. The next day, the next morning, when they crack our doors for chow at 6 a.m, you could hear them coming down. Click, 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 click. Your doors, you got like 5 seconds to step out and go to chow. If not, you're stuck in there. So I opened my door, and the dude's standing there holding the manuscript. And my immediate reaction was really kind of heartbreak. I was like, I said, what's wrong, man? Couldn't get into it? You didn't like it? He says, nah, bro, I finished it. I said, what? It's 1,100 pages, bro. It's like, I read for 24 hours straight, or 20 hours straight. Blew through it. I'm like, you serious, bro? He's like, yeah, I didn't go to chow, I didn't do nothing. I just sat on my bunk and read for a day. I'm like, holy crap, man. You liked it? He goes, it's exact words. They're still fresh in my memory. He goes, looks me down in the eye, says, dude, someday they're going to talk about this book across the country. And I'm like, who? Who's they? I didn't say that, but I was thinking in my mind, who's they? He's like, they're going to talk. And then his next thing he said is, I could sit here in my cell for 5 years and try to imagine up a story like that and never do it. He's like, how the F did you do that, bro? He's like, you weren't even born when that story took place. How could you do that? I'm like, I have some research and imagination. That's it. No, did some research on Vietnam because I read all the books. But other than that, I mean, it's just boom. He's like, it was so real that when you described the setting, the feel, the bugs, the sound, I started itching. I remembered being back in that. You described the FU bugs because bug sounds like saying FU. You described the sound perfectly. You described the smell so perfectly because it stunk there in Vietnam like rotten foliage. And he's like, dude, I was there, man. I can't believe it. And I'm like, thanks, man, thanks. So then I hand the book to a guy who's a dude named Ruben Maldonado, R.I.P. Ruben. He died last year in a car accident, my boy. I said, want to read this? I based the character off him in the end of the book while I was writing it. And I was like, I have a character. This guy named Big Rube, big Mexican dude. He's badass. So I let him read it next. And I did send it to my dad. My dad read it and said the same thing, like, oh, my God, this is amazing. It's like, I'm into it. So that was when I first kind of rekindled my relationship with my dad. I'll tell you that in a second. But basically, Ruben said he had to stop reading in his cell when his bunkie was there because he was crying. He's like, and this is a head of HASTA, Hispanic Americans striving to achieve, I think it's called. HASTA, he's the head Mexican in prison. The head one. The head of this big, tough Mexican dude. He's like, I didn't want my bunkie to see me crying, man. It's powerful, bro. It's powerful, dude. I'm like, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And then it just went on and on and on. As far as with my dad, and so I wrote my first 3 books handwritten with a pen. And you got to understand, like, I was not a good speller. Not. I had a good grasp on syntax and grammar, kind of, from reading so much, but I couldn't spell worth a shit. I didn't have a dictionary. I didn't have a thesaurus. And I just winged it, man. And I did my best. And now when I go back and look at it, I cringe. I'm like, oh, jeez. But eventually I got a typewriter. My dad, who I hadn't talked to in 5 years, we got in a beef like 2 years before I got locked up. And then I was like 3 years into my prison bit, and like 2 or 3 years. And I get a letter from him. And actually, I was dedicating that book, the Vietnam book, to my dad, because my dad was in Vietnam. So I was like, I'm going to dedicate this book to him, send it to him, say, hey, listen, I'm not a lost cause. Like, I still have potential to be something in life. You know what I'm saying? Read my book. You'll see I'm not a freaking just a loser. I know you think I am, and I'm doing all these years in prison. Read this book and you'll see, I'm not a waste. You didn't waste your seed on me. I'm going to try and be something in life. And then I get a letter from him like 2 weeks before I finished the book. And he says, how are you doing? So I wrote him a few letters, and I started telling him about my books that I wrote. And he says, man, can't you get a typewriter? So maybe you could type? And I'm like, yeah, well, I didn't want to bring that up, but I can buy the typewriters. They're $350. You can pay for it on a credit card over the phone and have it sent in, but they're $350. I don't have the money. Whatever. He said, I'll send you one. So he sends me a typewriter. I have no idea how to type. Zero, right? I'm this guy. And then I got to the point where I used claws. I have to look at the keys. I can't do it blind. And I only use these like this. I can type pretty fast, but I make a lot of mistakes. I still do. I just never learned how to type normal. I wish I could. Oh my God. My wife so fast. I'm like, I suck. But I taught myself how to type. And after it took about a whole book, on my next book after that, the last one I told you about, it's called A Dream's World, about this high school football team. They call the Dream Team. And this kid from small town Ohio ends up moving next door to this kid named Apollo. They call him Ape. Big, good-looking kid. He's a kind of superstar football player. And they're kind of like thug-like group of kids from Detroit. But they're misunderstood, if you will. They're not bad kids, but they get into some drama. They end up tearing up a mob-owned and run nightclub. The mob finds out it's them, and then they have these parties, these pimps and hoes parties that are like dress up parties, and the mob finds out they're the ones having the parties. So they said, you're going to have to start pushing our girls, our strippers, in your parties and pay off the 10 G's of damage you did at a club. And they get all kinds of drama. The main character was this kind of dorky kid who didn't play football or nothing like that, but they bring him into their world. And eventually, that's why it's called A Dream's World. It's a first-person book. So they bring him into this world, this it's a lower middle class Detroit kind of thugs there, but they're not bad kids. But the main character falls in love with his principal's daughter, who's some rich girl that goes to like a yuppie school, like a private all-girls school, and a senator's son is at the all-boys school next door at Notre Dame. It's Regina and Notre Dame, and the two like private schools right next to each other. And the senator's son, it has a thing for her. And the main character falls for her, and they get in this huge fight, and there's all these crazy fights and stuff. I wrote that next. Anyways, I end up writing my fifth novel. Was called Eagle's Talon. It's about like a Jason Bourne type of book. Very complex plot, really good. People are going to love it. It's just really interesting story. The main character is a ex-Navy SEAL, gets recruited to be the president's personal assassin. But then he turns on him. So now they're all trying to get him. You know what I'm saying? There's this organization called GILNET, Global Intelligence Network, that is run by the president's father, who's an evil power monger, this billionaire, and he is power for hire. If you got money and you need something, the chess piece of the world moved, he'll do it. And they use him to do this until he turns on him. The main character, his name is Max DeCupla, and then they find him, and there's a mob twist in that too, a little bit, and then I wrote To Be a King. That was my sixth novel, because I'm like, it's time to write this book. I finished everything. So basically, I wrote my first 5 books were books that I liked better than To Be a King, to be honest with you, which is crazy because I published this first. But here's the thing. I figured that I would publish these books first because when my wife finally reached out to me, I'm just going to keep going for a couple minutes. My wife finally reached out to me. I don't. Anyone who doesn't know my story, you got to learn it. It's crazy. But after I finished To Be a King, that story, my 6th book, as 2007, my friend started a Facebook page for me, and on it he put some sample chapters. I don't even know what Facebook is. Facebook's only like a year or two old. I don't even know what it is. I'm in prison. I'm just, I just got a TV for the first time in like 5 years. Like I didn't even have a TV for 5 years. And so he says he throws some sample chapters of To Be a King up on Facebook, and with a note that says anybody who's interested in maybe writing the author, he's in prison. He'd love to hear from you, give your opinion. So I start getting like fan mail. I get fan mail from people that I don't know. I have no idea who they are, and they're all going the same thing. Dude, you're the next Mario Puzo. That's what they kept saying. You're the next Mario Puzo, dude. They said, one guy said, I've read all of Mario Puzo's books. Now, one of them had me as engrossed as your book. And I'm thinking, what? I said, dude, I'm thinking to myself, you don't even know, bro. You haven't even scratched the surface, man. You're at 1% still. Wait till you read the full story, get to the end where I blow your mind. I'm a plot-driven writer, bro. My stories they slap you in the face when you're done and just make you go, oh my God. Like, how did I not see that? Now it makes sense. Like, whoa. That's how every book that I write has that same in the face at the end where you're like, whoa. So, anyways, my wife, I think she saw those sample chapters. Yeah, she did. And she read them. But she saw I was a Christian, and I saw I was in prison writing, and she happened to be from the neighborhood. She worked for a publisher in New York, but she worked in academic publishing, and she wrote me and said, I'd be interested in reading the full manuscript. I work in publishing academic, but I have friends who work in commercial fiction. If it's any good, maybe I can try to help you get it published. So I said, awesome. So I send the manuscript to my boy, Eli, have him turn it into a PDF file. So it's 1,100 pages. It's both volumes in one story. So I originally one book. Sends it in a PDF file, sends it to her. My wife reads the whole thing in 3 days on her phone and iPad. 3 days. She said, I couldn't stop. I mean, everything I did in those 3 days I was reading. Grocery shopping. She said she got her windshield fixed. She had a cracked windshield. They were closing. They come in the room and said, man, you've been done for an hour. She'd been in the waiting room waiting. It's like 3 hours. I'm like, man, we're closing. This thing's been done for an hour and a half. She's like, what? Oh, I didn't know. She's in there reading this book. She can't put it down. So she writes me and tells me, she told me this is the exact truth. First of all, she called me a unicorn. She said, in publishing, there's people are great writers and great storytellers, but usually not both. Unicorns are both. She's like, you're a unicorn. She says, your book is in the top 3 best books I've ever read. I'm a huge reader. I've read my whole life. I read the whole Little House on the Prairie series by age 4. I had a literary scholarship in high school. I worked at the bookstore in high school. My escape from my own reality, because her dad was this like tyrannical Muslim dictator who beat and abused her. She escaped into reading. So reading's what I do. She said, your book is the top 3 best books I've ever read. About 6 months later, after we kind of became a thing, a couple, she said, I lied to you about your book being in top 3. She said, your book was the best book I ever read. I just didn't want to blow up your head. I didn't want you thinking I was some, sycophant where I'm just like, whatever. So everybody knows the rest of history. We began writing, and writing is how I got my wife. You know what I'm saying? Writing back and forth, hundreds and hundreds of pages of letters. I mean, I remember writing there 70 pages in 1 week, 70 pages of letters. And she would send me 20, 30, 40 pages of letters every week. So it's basically, we stopped our life. I stopped writing my 7th novel, which is called The Lion Chaser, and started, which is about the youngest billionaire in the world. He's a runaway from foster care. It's a crazy story. But we started writing each other and did not stop for a year. And that was it. And we fell in love through letters. We got to know each other in an intimate way that most people will never get to know each other. Never. I mean, you can't imagine when you just can slow down and really articulate your thoughts and really be witty with your words, because we're both writers. She has written a couple of books. She's under a pen name, but she's written a couple of novels. And anyways, when you can slow down and write and get to know somebody, get in their heart, get in their mind, get in their soul through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I got a tote up here that's freaking like 500 pages. I mean, 500 letters, literally, because we kept writing the next 7 years while we had committed to get married. We were a couple of 7 years. We didn't stop writing. We kept writing every week. In fact, I didn't even start my last novel until like about a year and a half before I went home. So for like 2 years, 3 years, all I did was write her every day and get to know her. She got to know me, and I got to know her humor, her wit, her core values, her beliefs, everything. She got to know mine. And eventually we started talking on the phone after like a year. We started talking, and then we talked every day on the phone and spent a fortune. She spent I think she added up one time, it was $28,000 on the phone. It's crazy. But we still did letters every day because we're both writers and we love to write. So that is the story and the evolution of my writing. I just thought I'd share it because I think a lot of people might not know this. I just think a lot of people might find it fascinating, what I do and why. And so I just kept writing for 13 years straight, nonstop. I was either writing her or another book. And then wrote my last book. The last book was the Snowman Chronicles. The last one in prison, I wrote the Snowman Chronicles. This is the one I'm editing now. I did write last year. I wrote a political thriller, like a dystopian political thriller. It's really good. Beta readers love it. Everybody's love it. It's a perfect time to publish it, but because it can be a little controversial, it's a little bit right-leaning and conservative like me. And my producer for this TV series that I'm working on, he's like, you don't want cancel culture coming after you. And it's really not bad at all. In fact, the character is not me. It's not me. Some of the characters are right-leaning and like Christian or whatever. And because, like me, I lean that way, but not a lot. I'm not a radical or nothing, but when you have a multi-million-dollar TV series in production, you can't risk it like that. So I had to shelf this freaking book. So I said, while I shelf this book, until I can publish it, I'm just going to publish Snowman Chronicles, which is my readers are all going to love it. And also it opens up to a new market. The mafia genre is a very small niche market. It's just small. The mafia and true crime kind of like murder and stuff can be a big market, but mafia is a very small market. It's very small. Some people, unless you hit mainstream, unless you get like a Goodfellas movie or a Godfather movie or something like that, or unless you have a big story like Sammy the Bull, or I don't know how anybody can even like that guy. He's the biggest rat scumbag I can think of. But Michael Francis, if you're not them, you're not going to make any money from any books in mafia. Nobody does. I know a bunch of mafia writers, a bunch of them. I've interviewed them all, and they don't make nothing. There's nothing. Fiction is the way to go. That's fiction novels. But when my stupid ass tried to sit there and market my mafia novels to this niche market that's tiny and obsessed with mafia, like true crime mafia, it's the wrong market. Nobody's buying it. You know who reads my books? Middle-aged women, middle-aged dudes. I get it all the time. Everybody. I get so many women, middle-aged women. They're like, I just finished your book. Crazy. I get all the time. I get messages from private messages like, on Facebook and stuff. Like, I just finished your book. Oh my God. It's like a 50-year-old woman. She's like, I'm so into this. I'm into this type of stuff. I'm like, well, did you enjoy it? Yeah. Did you leave a review? Yeah. I always tell them to leave a review. They never do. People are lazy. I can't believe, that's another thing. If you read my book, go leave a review, man. It takes 90 seconds to just write one thought. Just the longer the better, obviously, but just put a thought on there. I know what you're thinking. I know if you read them, you love them. So just go say that. I read them, love them. Tell them what you thought. It's like 1 in 1,000 people leave a review. It's like, why, man? I am the same way. I'm guilty. I haven't left reviews for people. I've only left a couple in my life, but stupid. But if they do. Anyways, it's an hour and 11 minutes of rambling about my writing career. I hope that you read my books. To Be a King, Volume 1 and 2. Also, make sure. And by the way, while I was talking about my typewriter my dad bought me, I had it right here. This is the typewriter that I did all the business on. And it's funny. I remember showing it to Bill Crooks. He's like, someday that's going to be in the Smithsonian, man. Like this thing. It's been in the Smithsonian, bro. This was where all the magic happened. 18 characters. That's it. And I had this little board in here, like a cardboard thing with each chapter and all the pages lined up, and I go line by line by line, and where I sign a line I wanted to go, I'd have to use keywords to jump code 9H or whatever and jump to that, and then I edit it and and then go to the next line page by page by page. It took me about 1 week to edit a chapter, so I do 5 to 6 drafts for chapter. It takes me 7 days. So this is what did it. That's all I had. And there's other stories. Like I could tell you stories about how they took it away from me one time. The cops took it away from me and wouldn't give it back, dude. I was sick. It was like 6 weeks. They wouldn't give it back. I was ready to kill somebody. I was gonna kill somebody. I was gonna end up in a hole. In fact, that's when I got in one of the only fights I ever got in prison was when that happened. Not over that, but some other dude, stole some money on my phone. I went to sell and smash them. But it was that time. I was so like, out of sorts because I didn't have my Bella. That's what I call her, Bella, my mistress. I was out of sorts. I didn't have my typewriter, my great escape, man, my pacifier. Like the typewriter was my pacifier. And I said, I can go a few weeks with it. Don't worry. And then it started getting longer and longer, and they're just fucking me over really bad with it. Excuse my French. And I finally had to threaten them with a lawsuit and stuff. I had all my family calling. My wife was calling. Everybody started bombarding the warden, and they finally gave it back. But because I was going to lose it. I was like, I'm telling my family, and I'm like, I'm not going to make it, man. I'm telling you, I'm on a ticking time bomb. I took my typewriter and won't give it back. They say it's stolen. They say it's altered. I'm like, dude, I've had this typewriter for freaking, 8 years or whatever it is. Anyways, I got it back. So all good. That's my writing. I hope you enjoy that story and give this whole hour and 13 minutes a listen. And I also hope you do read my books, man. Or woman. I'm just saying, just all I can say is start with the reviews. Just go to the reviews and read the reviews. And you can tell they're all real. You can tell they're all, authentic, saying organic, whatever. And just think, man, if the book's as good as these reviews say, this must be a pretty damn good book. People are comparing it to The Godfather. People are saying this is better than The Godfather. Them saying, not me. People are saying, I am the next Mario Puzo who wrote The Godfather. I'm like, yeah, well, you just heard from me, my mouth, 3, 4, 5 of my books, what I wrote. I'm pretty sure that you'd think, oh, those sound pretty good. So check out the book. The books are $19. Break down, enjoy. I sell signed copies at my website, Art Thing Apparel website, which reminds me, get you some artthinapparel.com. And it's on the back. Your city's on the back, whatever city you're in. I'm Detroit, so we got hats and jackets and everything. And so order it custom made to your city. Anything that's embroidery, well, you can have custom made to your city. You can have Springfield, Massachusetts. You can have whatever you want. We do all the major cities on the screen, stuff like this. We have all kinds of, everything from shorts, hoodies, t-shirts, muscle shirts like this, all this thing, on and on. Check it out. If it's your thing. Whatever city you're from, own it. It's your thing, our thing. That's why I did it. It's not even the mafia thing. Most people will see. Most people will see this shirt and see Detroit, our thing, and they're just thinking, "Oh, Detroit, yeah, it's our thing." And then they start to look at the image, and like, "Oh, wait a minute, our thing. I get it. It's cool. It's got a little edgy vibe, urban, whatever." So hope you check it out. But you really hope you check out my books and look forward to my next book, The Snowman Chronicles. It's a really good story. It's if I say so myself, about the 2 cocaine smugglers. It's Blow meets Goodfellas. Not really Godfather, but Scarface. But it's like Blow crashes in that Goodfellas. It's crazy. And anybody who's read my books, I'm telling you, it's on that level. So I'm just saying, if you've read my books, then you'll know that the level I write at in terms of story, big story, and I tell you it's at that level, maybe bigger. You're like, oh, dude, it's serious. Billions of dollars involved, international stuff. It's crazy. Anyways, God bless. Hope you enjoyed this long video, and I'm gonna go publish it. So enjoy. God bless. Make sure to check out. Make sure to like and subscribe. By the way, if you haven't liked and subscribed at this point, I hope you do, and support the cause. I have something big popping that's coming soon. I'll announce it when the time is right. In the meantime, I'm like the little choo-choo train that can. Just keep going, man. Keep grinding, and when it pops, it'll pop, and then you'll know. So God bless. I'm out.
Former prisoner and inmate.
You did it. What are you doing, Guns?
You bit the hell out of me.
Wanna see you with your hands up. Going straight to the sky, let me see you put your hands up. Cause we do till we die and we on another level.
I'm at New York City.
To the first we get by, got a piece of the pie. Told you once, told you twice that we only got one life.
On the way to achieve success after prison, he's going to share his story with us right now.
Diamond shine, best at night.